Billy Mitchell is a very tall man, so Billy wouldn't need to stand on a paint can or a roll of tape or a toolbox to make himself taller.
Karl Lost at the checkout.
Now, there has been an incredibly long internet beef at the minute running between the YouTuber Karl Lost and world record holder Billy Mitchell. This feud, I think, has been lasting longer than Game of Thrones has had seasons. A quick rundown, Karl Lost, he's a YouTuber that talks about mostly speedrunning, and he called out Billy Mitchell for accusing him of basically cheating his world record of Donkey Kong, among other things. And then Billy Mitchell, in turn, tried to sue him, and surprisingly, suing a YouTuber, he actually won the case. Now, I know I'm giving the spark notes there. I've already done multiple videos talking about this, but now Karl has put out a near 2-hour-long video basically explaining his side of everything. Now, before I even get into the video, Karl actually did a little quick TLDR in the description for people that don't want to sit and watch a 2-hour video. It says, number 1, I'm an idiot. Number 2, Billy lost $500,000. Number 3, none of the money this channel earns goes to Billy. Number 4, Billy is a moron. Number 5, the GoFundMe was not a scam. Number 6, Billy is a lying con man. Number 7, Billy does not stand on things to make himself look taller. Number 8, slop tubers are the worst. So Karl opens up the video talking about the fact that he lost the lawsuit against Billy, and as I've said in previous videos, Billy was reveling in the fact that Karl actually lost this lawsuit. Again, I've talked about it before, but he was even launching, I think, like hot sauces, some kind of brand, and he was basically using a discount code for Karl Lost to get a discount off his products.
Get 10% off all sauces using the discount code Karl Lost at the checkout.
But even though he did officially lose the lawsuit, he's still looking into appealing the decision.
When I made my previous video regarding the result of the lawsuit, I was still actively looking into appealing the decision, which meant going back into court was a real possibility.
Which now means he can't actually talk about things in too much detail because it could affect a future court case or appeal system. But now it's came out that Karl doesn't actually want to appeal the decision. He's kind of like taken the L, so to speak. So now, because he knows that there'll be no rebuttal, no appeal, he can now basically talk openly about what happened to him.
But first, Ricky's world famous sauce is running a sale using the discount code Karl Lost.
So at one point, Karl actually talks about the denial that he accused Billy of being a major contributing factor in Apollo's death. If you remember, this was a huge point in the lawsuit because Billy Mitchell was not trying to sue Karl over accusing him of cheating. He was basically suing him for insinuating that he was the reason that Apollo Legends took his own life. A quick rundown with Apollo Legends. He was another YouTuber that would talk about speedruns, but he would also focus on trying to expose people that basically faked their speedruns. And after Apollo unfortunately took his life, Karl made a video on Billy Mitchell, basically insinuating that he was the reason behind that. But he also does say his word usage is actually being very careful, as it was in the original response video.
Billy's lawsuit against me alleged that I accused Billy of being a major contributing factor in Apollo Legends' decision to take his own life. And I have always denied that, both in my legal defense and publicly. I would pick apart the exact words that I used and argued that I never technically said that. And if anyone did come away from my statements with the impression that Billy was in some way responsible, then it was their fault for adding meaning to my words that weren't there.
Now, Apollo, while he was still alive, was actually sued by Billy Mitchell because he did do videos on Billy, the same that Karl did. He was actually sued for defamation, and apparently that was settled. But Apollo actually had to remove basically all the videos talking about Billy Mitchell. Now, one surprising thing Karl goes into detail over is apparently he was wrong about the sum of money that Apollo Legends had to actually pay Billy Mitchell in the settlement. And he also agrees that Apollo Legends' cause of death had basically nothing to do with Billy Mitchell.
Apollo had to pay a large sum of money in his settlement, which put him into debt. I still had no justification for making the connection between Billy and Apollo's suicide. Apollo never suggested it himself, and the evidence doesn't point to it.
He also admits that while he was like caught up in this whole process of being correct, he actually couldn't really see the bigger picture. He did actually contact a highly experienced lawyer, but even that lawyer said, bro, in the video, you kind of did imply that Billy Mitchell was the reason that Apollo Legends took his own life.
And even after the judge's verdict, which ruled that I did make that claim, I refused to accept it. I was fully intending on appealing, and referred my case to a much more experienced and much more expensive lawyer for his opinion. He told me that I did imply that, and it was defamatory.
So I'm guessing because of that second opinion, Jobst has basically put his hands up and gone, okay, fair enough, I've defamed Mitchell, and the lawsuit was just. I mean, to be fair, at one point, Karl even admits, like, emotions got in the way, like, he really disliked Billy on, like, a personal level. Like, this wasn't just, you know, about, like, YouTube money or views. Like, he had a personal dislike for the guy.
I have allowed my feelings towards Billy negatively affect my judgment at every step of the way. I think Billy is a terrible person. I think he sues innocent people. I think he is a cheater and a compulsive liar.
And he says that he acted improper towards him because of that hatred for him.
But that does not mean I can say and do whatever I want in response. Two wrongs don't make a right. Billy can lie all he wants, but I shouldn't let his actions affect my own moral compass.
Like, for example, that retraction video that was put at the end of a 20-minute Dark Souls speedrun analysis.
My retraction should have been far better. Again, at the time, I was in denial and I didn't want to believe my mistake was that severe, so I felt as though making a retraction at all was sufficient. And I really did want the video with the retraction in it to get a lot of views. But it really should have been its own video, and not placed at the end of a separate video. I don't think all retractions need to be in a separate video, but considering the severity of my mistake, which I now acknowledge, in hindsight, it really should have been its own video.
So basically the opening of this video is Karl just admitting fault on all sides, which is like really strange because I remember at the beginning of this drama, everyone was in support of Karl and obviously everyone hated Billy Mitchell, and now it seems that things have kind of turned a little bit. Not fully. I mean, obviously Karl will still have his fan base, he'll still have his supporters. It's not like his career's in ruin or anything. Now, Karl then talks about one of the biggest points of criticism he'd received, you know, following the announcement that he lost the lawsuit. That was people basically saying that he was lying about the nature of the GoFundMe lawsuit, because at the time he made a GoFundMe solely to basically pay for his legal funds, his legal defense.
I never personally lied about what the lawsuit was about, but I was obviously negligent in some way, given how many people had the wrong impression.
Now, I did cover this in the past, but going over the GoFundMe, some of the wording is a little bit vague, and obviously at no point does it actually mention Apollo Legends at any point, because that was the main thing that Billy was actually suing Karl over. And because of things being a little bit vague, people basically just implied that he was lying. Now, he does hold on to the point, saying that he never lied at any point, but he does also say the sheer amount of people that were like, you know, feeling that they were misled. He's actually willing to admit negligence there. He brings up examples like when he reported on new reports of the lawsuit who were actually getting things wrong.
Everyone was reporting on it wrong. I wanted to show what the news was saying, but every single news article or post about it was wrong.
He says that that was just to show what the news were talking about, but he himself actually admits that this is like pretty misleading. He basically says that news coverage on this was just outright wrong and it wasn't correct. And also says it was reckless to kind of cover it and not clarify that they're wrong.
I wasn't trying to do something nefarious, it was just stupid and thoughtless, and I didn't give my audience enough consideration or respect to make sure they weren't confused. And for that, I am deeply sorry.
Now, I'm going to be Mr. Krabs for a minute because I'm going to be talking about money. So Jobst talks about the total cost of money for damages. This was around 390,000 Australian dollars. That's also with interest.
The total amount of damages plus interest in the judgment of the lawsuit was $390,000.
But of course, that wasn't the only money Karl would lose, because according to Australian law, if you lose a court case, you then have to pay the winner a percentage of their legal fees on top of that. So Billy Mitchell's lawyers actually reported that they spent the best part of $700,000 on the case. But, you know, they're in a good mood, they were feeling nice, and they only wanted $600,000 to be paid back. Meaning that the total debt for Karl was 990,000 Australian dollars. That's basically just over $500,000 USD. For comparison, because I know some people treat Australian dollars like it's some kind of monopoly money, that's 646,000 USD or 480,000 pounds. The problem is, though, Karl didn't really have a spare $1 million lying around. Even with the funds from people like Notch and public support, he'd still have to pay around $150,000 out of his own pocket.
And while the public and especially Notch were very generous to me, I still had to spend at least $150,000 of my own money to cover them, and despite what Billy seems to believe, I am not rich.
So all of this led to Karl basically filing for bankruptcy in early May. Now, there are so many finer details here, like in Australian law, it requires you to be investigated by trustees to see if there's like foul play in your bankruptcy.
And it's the job of the trustee to take possession of any assets or property they are legally allowed to possess and realize their value, which simply means they take what they are allowed to take and they sell it for money, which they can then give to creditors.
And also, they can take things like property and sell it to creditors to try to wipe away the debt. Why did I think of like BioShock Infinite when I said that? God, my brain is cooked.
Who's there?
Bring us the curb and wipe away the debt!
Australian law also states that spouses' possessions aren't actually subject to this because Karl and his wife basically co-own the property that they live in. She was basically allowed to kind of like buy his shares of the property. You know, that was so he didn't have to lose the entire house, basically. Now, there were a lot of people on Reddit as well that were criticizing him for basically shifting properties so he didn't have to pay back the creditors and outright accusing him of just committing fraud.
My comments about my wife buying out my property were posted to Reddit, saying that I was boasting about moving assets to my wife before declaring bankruptcy to avoid paying creditors, which of course is not what I said at all. And the comments were all claiming that I was bragging about committing fraud and that I'm a criminal. I'm surprised to learn how many Australian bankruptcy lawyers there are on r/YouTube drama.
But I wouldn't really say that's the case because Karl's wife, you know, she had her full legal name written on the house. This was also done with the help of trustees, so it was basically all above board, all completely legal. Now, Jobst also brings up a channel called LUS, who basically accused him of breaking the law, and apparently got their viewers to basically send screenshots of Karl talking about his wife buying the property to Australian bankruptcy courts.
We need to send these to the bankruptcy court. We need to send this video to the bankruptcy court. I need to get in touch with the bankruptcy court and let them know what's going on. Because if this is real, and this is not sarcasm, there are many things that Karl said that he could end up in jail. Forget owing a bunch of money.
Now, someone actually went through this with a fine-tooth comb, but again, because what Karl did was legal, nothing came of it. Now, a lot of people had a game theory that basically all the money that Karl's making from the channel now will go straight into Billy Mitchell's pocket. Karl basically shuts that down immediately and says, no, that isn't happening. It's not going to Billy.
Most YouTubers of my size will create a company for their YouTube channel, so the money earned by this channel doesn't go to me directly. It goes to the company. So this answers the question of whether or not the money earned by this channel goes to Billy. No, it doesn't.
The trustees basically took Karl's shares of the company that runs his channel, and his wife again bought those shares, meaning the money doesn't actually go to him directly. And because Mitchell personally sued Karl, not Karl's company, the company isn't actually affected at all.
Billy did not sue the company, nor does he have any ownership or interest in it. Billy can only take money from me as an individual, and only if I earn over a certain amount, which I will explain in a moment.
But because recently, with the lawsuit and everything else going on, he admits that his channel has been tanking, so both Karl and his wife are basically going to reduce their salary.
It seems at this moment I'm receiving about half the views I was before. Of course, I hope this improves and I will work hard to rebuild my channel, but that's where it stands as of right now. At these views, the company is not earning enough to pay 2 salaries of $150,000 plus expenses, so our salaries will be reduced. Certainly, they will be reduced to a level below the threshold where I would need to begin paying the trustee any money,
which actually puts them below the required earnings to start paying Billy back. And apparently, after 3 years, this entire debt will just be erased.
Australian bankruptcy lasts for 3 years. After 3 years, all of my debts are discharged, which basically means they are permanently erased. And yes, this includes my debt to Billy.
So a rough estimate here, if Karl and his wife are like paying themselves less, he'll only basically have to pay around $150,000 directly. That's from his wife wife buying up shares in the company and property, and the trustees taking $50,000. Which apparently means, even though Billy did win the lawsuit, he is going to lose $500,000.
But I would guess that Billy will receive somewhere around $150,000. And given that Billy incurred legal fees of $686,000, it means that despite winning, Billy still lost over $500,000.
So, we're probably wondering now, what was Billy Mitchell's reaction, apart from relentlessly mocking him on Twitter constantly? I'll be honest, I still cannot get over that hot sauce bit. The fact that that is real is crazy.
Get 10% off Karl Lost.
Now, Karl did make an offer to Billy for $300,000. That was mostly sourced from his family, since he wouldn't be able to pay the full $600,000.
So instead of me paying Billy $300,000 and retaining all of my personal debts of over $100,000, I was forced into bankruptcy. Effectively, Billy rejecting my offer cost him $150,000 and saved my family $200,000, which just shows how good faith and generous my offer really was.
Now, apparently Billy just outright refused this offer, so basically he lost out on an extra $150,000 through Karl going bankrupt. Now, Karl apparently was the only person in the party to make a settlement offer during the lawsuit, because apparently Billy just was going full scorched earth, like he did not want any settlement. He basically wanted to bury Karl. And again, from the things I've seen him say about Karl, I am not surprised in the slightest.
On the topic of generous offers, I was the only party to ever make a formal settlement offer during the lawsuit. On the 23rd of May 2022, I offered to settle the lawsuit with the following terms. I pay Billy $3,000, I never repeat the statements he has a problem with, and we both walk away. Now, you might look at this offer and think that $3,000 is not a lot of money. But again, considering that Billy's best case scenario, if he kept suing me, was to lose $500,000, this offer was extremely generous.
Again, I've talked about this in previous videos, but I don't think you guys understand how much of a #1 hater Billy Mitchell is to Karl Jobst. This is more hate than 50 Cent had on P. Diddy. Like, if you go onto Billy Mitchell's YouTube channel, he found like a really old archive video of Karl doing like dating advice, how to riz women, and the description says, "Welcome to the Karl Jobst files. Here we will preserve the greatest videos created by the absolute virgin himself. Only he can teach us how to grow confidence and approach women." Now, this whole situation with denying the settlement is quite bizarre because, as Karl states in the video, this is basically the best case scenario for Billy. Like, he won, but now he's still $500,000 down because of it. Now, it's pretty obvious what Billy wanted. He basically wanted Karl to just go completely bankrupt because, again, he was celebrating on Twitter, and the video I just talked about that he somehow pulled out of like the internet archives.
He even went out of his way to let the public know that it happened. This surprised me. I assumed Billy would want to keep this a secret for as long as possible, because by its definition, the fact that I went bankrupt confirms I don't have the money to pay him.
But later on as well, Billy was actually accusing Karl of breaking the law during the bankruptcy proceedings, which again, as you can pretty much tell, both sides didn't really want to back down. Karl actually made like a settlement offer, Billy turned it away, but these are two people that deeply hate each other. I mean, most likely for Karl, this was realizing he wasn't right, and for Billy, it was the fact he was going to lose $500,000 over the lawsuit. Now, you're probably wondering why the video is 2 hours long if it's just going over the finer details of this lawsuit. A lot of it is attacking Billy, which I'm really not surprised about because, again, he's lost the lawsuit. He probably has nothing but absolute vitriol for the guy. He, spends the next 10 minutes basically criticizing Billy as a husband, father, property owner, CEO of his hot sauce company. Again, the discount code 10% off Karl Lost.
And he still claims he invented the hot sauce to this very day. But this idea that Billy created the hot sauce or the company that sells it seems to be something he fabricated himself. Billy's hot sauce company was formed in 1988 by Billy's parents. And according to news articles at the time, the hot sauce was developed by Billy's mother, Barbara. And this was always the case up until 1999, when Billy decided to start taking credit for his mother's work.
Now, obviously, after Billy won the lawsuit, his YouTube channel started posting quite a lot of videos, basically just celebrating, mocking Karl as much as possible, and Karl actually goes over some of these videos. Now, 2 months ago, I actually did upload a video video going over these responses myself. So you can go and check that out if you need a refresher. But I'll be honest, you're not even watching the video, are you? Let's be real. You probably got me on your second monitor or on your TV while you're scrolling TikTok. Come on, don't kid yourself. So there's a lot of finer details here. Like, for example, Karl basically calls out Billy for now acknowledging the existence of the second complaint, as in the past he basically denied its existence.
Billy said that I was lying about the second complaint and that there was only ever one complaint. Now he finally admits there was indeed a second complaint that was sent to us, and we were advised that it would be filed if the first lawsuit didn't resolve. I am very happy that Billy is finally willing to admit this.
He also calls out Mitchell after Mitchell apparently accused him of trying to apply to dismiss the lawsuit entirely.
Billy shows a document on screen and claims that I submitted an application attempting to dismiss the lawsuit. What he's showing on screen is an order from the judge. Let's take that same document and scroll it down slightly to see what it says. It says the plaintiff, aka Billy, will further provide security for the defendant's costs of the proceeding in the amount of $15,000. So what is Billy going on about? This has nothing to do with dismissing the case.
The document that Billy actually shows on screen is actually a request from Karl to require Billy to actually put more money down. As obviously Billy Mitchell is American, Karl is Australian, so retrieving the money would be pretty difficult in the case that Karl actually won. The judge actually agreed to that, and Billy had to actually pay $15,000. Now, Karl claims that the second lawsuit, Billy was basically hanging over his head. Now, this is one that didn't actually go through because apparently he changed his mind, but he thinks that this lawsuit was basically, like, the sole intention for it was to cause him psychological damage, saying himself that he thinks that this is like one of the most evil things that Billy could do.
Now, what you really couldn't imagine is going through an existing lawsuit and then being told you're going to be sued again. And this wasn't just an idle threat. This was Billy's lawyer sending us the physical complaint and saying that he had instructions to file it. It was literally the most stressful thing I've ever experienced in my entire life. Billy sits there and doesn't even realize that by him explaining that he sent a second lawsuit and told us that it would be filed and then changed his mind at some point and decided not to tell me and my family is one of the most disgusting and pure evil things he has ever done. It was an outright abuse of the legal system, and it was done just to cause as much psychological damage as possible. Well, congratulations, it worked.
So obviously Karl has one lawsuit going on, and then Billy threatens him with a second lawsuit, and he says that that was the reason why he started the GoFundMe in the first place.
I could not handle the ongoing stress of the impending second lawsuit, so I asked the public for help. I didn't ask immediately because I don't like asking for money.
But Billy, in return, saw the GoFundMe, was annoyed that people were actually giving him money for a legal defense, and basically said it was set up under false pretenses. Because Karl apparently was meant to know that it was never coming, as in the second suit.
You obviously knew the second lawsuit was not coming, or at the very least, you were unsure if it ever was. You created a GoFundMe campaign with the knowledge and intent to fund the existing lawsuit on false premises. Period. End of paragraph.
Billy asserts he doesn't believe I ever thought it was ever coming. Well, apparently he was pretty convincing, because it wasn't just me who thought that, it was my lawyers as well.
I mean, Karl even shows the script for the GoFundMe video and says that he sent it to his lawyers to basically check everything was like legal, above board. Now, his lawyers did apparently say him insulting Billy in the video, not really the best idea, but even with a professional opinion, the lawyers that Karl hired genuinely thought that this second lawsuit wasn't just a psyop, it really was coming. But at the same time, if Billy never actually told anyone that the second lawsuit wasn't going ahead, by the time the statute of limitations had run out, it was basically confirmed that the second lawsuit wasn't happening. But by that time, Karl was basically already withdrawing the money from the GoFundMe and was using it on legal fees.
If they let me know the second lawsuit was never going to happen and I didn't tell my donors, that might be considered unethical. At least at that point, I could have offered refunds. I mean, just the relief of knowing the second lawsuit was no longer coming would have caused me to just cancel the GoFundMe completely. I might have done another GoFundMe at a later stage, but the basis for that crowdfunding would obviously be different. Instead, because Billy couldn't be bothered telling me or anyone else on the planet that he wasn't going to sue me, we had to wait another 6 months until the statute of limitations expired to know that he wasn't going to sue.
Which, again, like the money at the GoFundMe, that's what it was raised for. It was raised for legal fees. Now, this might be the last time I talk about this drama because it is incredibly technical. There are so many finer details, and I really thought seeing a 2-hour video from Karl, this would be the final video. No, it's not. Now, Karl also hinted at an incredibly long video that would basically go over every time Billy Mitchell lied in court. I genuinely feel like this drama is never going to end. Now, he said that this was the original idea for this video, but then he decided against it because he was basically unsure if he wanted to just make like an expose on Billy Mitchell or if he wanted people to hear his side of the story. But what he tries to do in this video is give some specific examples of when Billy Mitchell was lying. So Billy claims that his dispute with Twin Galaxies cost him only 1 appearance, which was basically conventions, public speaking.
Was there any impact on the number of appearances you were receiving or invitations to do appearances?
Off the top of my head, I can think of one place that called and canceled. But as far as the number of appearances that I got, no.
A single appearance. And in that lawsuit, he claimed he lost all of these appearances.
But during his lawsuit with Twin Galaxies, he actually claimed that he lost 14 appearances, not just 1. Now, Karl basically claims that Billy did this on purpose to hide the fact how badly his reputation tanked because of Twin Galaxies, and basically shifting the blame away from them and making it look like Karl was the main reason that his reputation tanked so much.
But in the lawsuit against Twin Galaxies, he specifically claimed that he lost those appearances. The point is that he was trying to downplay the damage that Twin Galaxies did in order to claim that his reputation was fantastic at the time that I made my video, and it was entirely my fault that he could no longer get appearances. In my trial, he said that up until my video, he was doing 15 to 20 appearances per year. But after my video, he was only able to do 1.
There was another example as well where Karl actually shown an email from John Weeks, who was the owner of the Museum of Pinball Machines. And he was saying that Billy basically couldn't host his pinball auction solely because of his legal battle with Karl and all the negative press that Billy Mitchell got previously.
Billy showed this email in court, which is apparently from John Weeks apologizing for not being able to host Billy at his pinball auction due to my video. And he testified that he lost this gig because of me.
But he actually cited the Twin Galaxy lawsuit as the reason why John Weeks didn't actually want Billy Mitchell to host. But then Karl actually shows a news article with a photograph of him at the pinball auction promoting it.
There is even a news article that shows he was there. Here is a nice picture of Billy promoting it, saying, influential video game legend Billy Mitchell was on hand during the auction at the Museum of Pinball in Banning, September 24, 2021. The email is dated 28th of September 2021. So apparently, even though Billy was at the event and was helping to promote it publicly alongside John Weeks, Mr. Weeks felt the need to email Billy 4 days later, apologizing for not being able to host him at the event. And of course, the judge accepted that this email was sufficient evidence to confirm that my video had damaged Billy's reputation.
Karl also claims that the barristers and legal representatives didn't actually push Billy on the things that he wanted them to, and also didn't present a lot of the evidence that Karl wanted them to present.
I told my barrister to press Billy on this and show him the article, and he again refused. There was tons of evidence I told them to present, which they didn't. There were tons of questions I told them to ask, which they didn't. They did things the way they wanted to do it, and my opinion wasn't very relevant. Now, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know if this was because of rules of evidence or some legitimate reason, but the fact remains, there were tons of questions and evidence that I wanted to present that I had no control over and were never shown.
He also wants to push back on the idea that Billy has been declared not a cheater twice now. That's twice in a court of law as well. That's because the lawsuit against Karl from Billy was about Apollo Legend, not him being a cheater.
Karl makes a claim that I'm a proven cheater. Twin Galaxies had the opportunity to prove in court that I cheated. It couldn't.
And with the Billy Mitchell and Twin Galaxies lawsuit, that was actually a settlement. Not because Billy Mitchell was found not guilty, but because Twin Galaxies didn't want to lose all their money like Billy might be now.
Twin Galaxies settled with Billy Mitchell because I assume Jay Saul isn't a moron who wanted to lose a ton of money running a trial where even if he won, there was no benefit. Twin Galaxies was the defendant. They never wanted the lawsuit to begin with. It was Billy pushing everything forward. Remember, Billy won against me and still lost $500,000.
Now, there's this really bizarre bit that Karl goes into a lot of detail over. He basically spends 5 minutes over talking about this claim that Billy Mitchell stands on things to make himself look taller, kind of like a Tom Cruise thing. You know, Tom Cruise, he wears like platform shoes to make himself look taller. So Karl, in this really snide way, basically apologizes profusely to Billy for calling him short while showing footage of Billy Mitchell standing on things to make himself look taller.
Billy Mitchell is a very tall man, and being tall makes you a better person. So Billy wouldn't need to stand on a paint can or a roll of tape or a toolbox to make himself taller. I sincerely apologize for spreading these disgusting false rumors.
So in his final part of the video, Karl turns the mirror onto slop tubers, people that have been covering the situation and getting a lot of the details wrong. Nope. But he focuses most of his attention onto LUS. This is a channel that has apparently made 52 videos on Karl. Now, there was a screenshot circulating of Karl basically saying he was going to report LUS's channel, which was falsely attributing to Jobst wanting to, silence LUS. Now, Karl basically says that the video is just full of lies about him.
All of those 52 videos are full of lies. He just makes things up and spouts them as fact.
Like, for example, Karl never checked his script for the GoFundMe with his lawyers.
Remember how I checked with my lawyers before posting my GoFundMe to make sure I was describing things correctly? Well, here is LUS spreading the lie that I never checked with my lawyers.
So if Karl had any question about this and how he should phrase the terminology, he can go straight to his very expensive lawyers.
The same guy also claims that Karl never actually made an offer to give Billy more money, especially when he was going to go bankrupt.
Remember how I told Billy before going bankrupt that I would be going bankrupt, and I made an offer that would give him twice as much money as he otherwise would have gotten? An offer Billy declined. Here is LUS spreading the lie that I never attempted to make such an offer.
At the end of the day, in many of these situations, the difference between Billy Mitchell and Karl Jobst is that there's such animosity coming from Karl Jobst. There's such hatred coming from him. He just can never come to settlement. But in many of these other cases...
He also claims that Karl never actually contacted Notch when he needed money instead of putting up a GoFundMe, despite the fact that Karl, in the video, says himself that he did actually do that.
At the very beginning of the lawsuit, Notch was paying my lawyers directly, and this was being handled by Notch's assistant. After several months, his assistant indicated that she wanted to stop supporting, at which time I messaged Notch through Twitter, which was how I connected with him in the first place. I wanted to let him know what happened and to confirm if he really did want to stop paying. Though ultimately he didn't read my message and it's been sitting on sent ever since. This meant that I had to find money elsewhere. Here is LUS spreading the lie that I never contacted Notch after he stopped supporting me, and that the GoFundMe shouldn't have been made because I should have just reached out to Notch.
He never actually recontacts Notch. Well, the first thing I would do is contact Notch and say, hey man, I really appreciate all the help.
Now, Karl admits that he did want to report LUS, but apparently the reason behind it is because he was defaming his wife, and apparently telling their viewers to report her to the government.
He started defaming my wife, calling her a criminal, saying that she will go to jail, inciting his viewers to attack her and report her to the government.
Wang, who's Karl's wife, which I proved to you, born in China. I have all the information, right? I'm not going to reveal it. Your wife be going to jail too. Your wife is going to jail too. We need to send these to the bankruptcy court.
This is an innocent person, mind you, who has done absolutely nothing wrong.
Now, the discussions between Karl's wife and the trustees actually got delayed because the people in this community were apparently sending reports and the trustees needed to investigate them. And then there was a screenshot that Karl shows saying he was actually going to report, but that was taken back 13 minutes later. And it was clarified 1 hour later saying that he actually wasn't going to report.
A grand total of 13 minutes, my threat of reporting him was legitimate. And honestly, I still think I have a pretty good reason to report his channel. But I didn't, and I won't.
Now, at the time of recording, this channel did actually put out a video basically apologizing to Karl, but the more you watch the video, you actually realize it isn't really an apology, but a challenge. Basically asking Karl to sue him. Basically saying, if Karl feels that I've defamed him, I'm making it easy for him to sue me. I will show him my financials and put to $1 million in escrow to either the judge or his US lawyer. I will represent myself. No other lawyers on my side or legal assistance. I will let Karl Jobst decide whether he wants to go the full length to trial. If he does, no delays, no summary judgment motions. We just go to trial. Karl Jobst can decide on judge or jury trial. I will take odds versus Karl Jobst fans now. $1 to 5 if Karl Jobst wins. All money I receive will be donated to charity on a live stream or a large Uber Eat tip for the entire amount. If I lose, I will pay you $5 for every $1 you wager. So it's obviously not an apology at all. It's basically just a challenge for Karl. I'm assuming that Karl is pretty much done with lawsuits for the foreseeable future, especially after the whole Billy Mitchell situation. Honestly, probably the last time I talk about this. Because this is very, there's a lot of legal jargon. There's not really much of a way that I can make it entertaining because, again, there's a lot of serious angles here. Like, for example, Apollo legend, rest in peace. Yeah, this will probably be the last time I talk about this.